Welcome to My Soul for another in our series of exclusive interviews. This time we have the incredibly talented Jarrod Lawson. Welcome to My Soul.
Thank you.
So you've released your album this year and you've just done 2 sold-out shows at Ronnie Scott's. You're touring the UK, Europe, Stockholm Jazz Festival. This has happened incredibly quickly. How does it all feel?
Right. Overwhelming, extremely overwhelming. Just kind of holding on for dear life, to be honest. Yeah.
Did you imagine any of this would happen when you finally finished your album and stuff?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I had no expectations, but this was the last thing I would have expected to happen, to be honest.
And how does it feel to actually be here now and actually doing it? And you've obviously done your first shows and stuff. How did that feel?
Amazing. I mean, the people are so warm here and so enthusiastic about things that they love. And in this case, it happens to be my music. So it just makes me feel great.
So on the face of it, on the surface, it looks like this kid, he's recorded an album overnight. It's all happened very quickly, but that's not the real story, is it? Because although you look very young, you're not actually very young.
Right.
And this has been a long time coming. This is you've put a lot of preparation to be where you are now. So tell us a bit about the story. What's been happening? Because you didn't start out, music wasn't your career originally, was it?
No, I mean, it's kind of always been my passion. But I mean, I worked as a stonemason for almost 10 years. And I've done a lot of like hard labor jobs actually kind of along the way. Just trying to figure out, how to get by and balance that with my passion, which was always music. But yeah, I mean, it's been a long road in terms of getting to where I am musically now. And if we're talking about this album, it's been like a decade-long project, really, if we're talking about from the time that I started composing some of these tunes, easily over 10 years now. And then, of course, the recording process started about 4 years and 4 years ago, and just came to completion.
It's an incredibly inspiring story because you're coming to this later in life than lots of people, yet still you've done it, and the success in a short period of time has been incredible, and it's all happening very, very quickly. So, it's incredibly inspirational. So talk to me about the sort of journey for you with music. Where did music first start for you? Where did you come from a musical family? What's your sort of background?
My father's a musician, and literally my first memories are of our home was a recording studio. It was like in a light industrial area in Redwood City, California. I think there was like a restaurant on one side of us and, I don't know, like a dry cleaner or something on the other side. It was not a residential area. We lived in that space. So I grew up, from the time I was, 2 years old, when I started actually making memories, I recall bopping around the studio and playing on the drums and, grabbing a guitar. And, I was surrounded by instruments and music, being recorded around me all the time. So that was kind of, I got my start. I started playing the drums actually right when I was 2 years old.
Wow.
So
when did you start to actually take it a bit more seriously and start sort of having a go and getting into the piano and other instruments and stuff? When did that start to happen?
Well, we moved to Oregon when I was 8 years old, and I think maybe a few years later, when I was maybe 10 or 11 or so, I became intrigued with my father's record collection and really started going through it and rifling through, and I found Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, and that was a very pivotal moment for me, finding that album, and literally, I don't think I listened to anything else for months, not even kidding. At that moment, I realized that I had never listened to any music that made me feel the way that music did, and it kind of changed my trajectory in terms of how I thought about my own future as a musician. And I realized, I think at that point, that I wanted to be a songwriter. Not just a musician, I wanted to be a songwriter and a singer-songwriter. So that was kind of when it happened, I think.
And what was the pivotal moment? Because you said you've been sort of songwriting and working on music for a long time, pretty much through your whole life. When did you actually think or believe this actually could be your career? So you've been a stonemason, you've been a piano technician, you've had lots of other jobs. When did it actually become something you felt could be real and a full-time career?
I mean, I think it's always been there, in the back of my mind that that how could I ever really do anything else? You know, it's always been, music has been that near and dear to my heart, and I just have a fierce passion for it. I always have. I think, I don't know, man. I think maybe by the time I got out of high school, I really started to take it more seriously. And my voice particularly. I think at that point, my voice started to mature, I think, in a way to where I started to hear different qualities coming out of my voice and thinking, wow, maybe I can actually do this, you know, and kind of pursue this like dream of being like a soulful singer-songwriter, that's what has always kind of touched me the most in music. When I listen to music, are artists that sing with that kind of soulful approach.
And you've also, in terms of your musical influences, you've absorbed lots of different types of music as well, haven't you? Because there's periods of time that you've listened to a lot of classical music, I think, and stuff as well. So yeah. What other influences have you had?
Yeah, a lot of classical music, a lot of jazz music. I went through a period when I was listening to a lot of reggae music. I've kind of been all over the board, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I've gone through periods of time of listening to, you know, Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, and then I'll listen to Jaco Pastorius and Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock, you know, and then I'll listen to, you know, Miles Davis and, you know, Bill Evans, or, you know, I'm all over the place when it comes to my listening habits.
And do you think that's the reason that your compositions are quite layered and complex, coming from all those different influences and stuff? Much more so than many other sort of people in your field.
I would assume so, right? Must have something to do with it.
So back to the sort of Stevie Wonder connection. So you did this video doing a cover of I Wish, which has led on to lots of amazing things, and it led on to being part of the Capital Jazz Cruise in the States. So what happened there? Talk us through what happened exactly.
As far as the cruise,
well,
how
as far
that
as
came about?
That video, and then what that's led on to in terms of the cruise and stuff, and how that sort of came about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I threw that video up one day. You know, I was kind of messing around with that song and kind of came up with this little Latin-infused sort of arrangement on it. And I threw it up on YouTube one day. And what was that, 2 years ago, I got a call from Cliff Hunt from Capital Jazz. And he says, hey man, how would you like to come fill in for Frank McComb in the piano lounge on the Capital Jazz Super Cruise? And I'm just like super confused when he first said that. I'm just like, I think you got the wrong guy. Who are you looking for again? So yeah, that ended up working out. I did the cruise that year and then the subsequent year, last year. And yeah, it's been a really great relationship. I ended up meeting Dwayne Tellisford, my manager, who also works for Capital Jazz. We became good friends that first year on the cruise, and then last year, I think our relationship was sort of solidified, and when it came time for me I was thinking about, you know, who I wanted to manage me. He just kind of came to the top of the list. I was like, man, I love that dude.
And I understand that on the cruise, initially you were in the piano lounge and people weren't really paying that much attention, but then when you did the open mic session with Eric Roberson, suddenly everything changed. So what happened? Talk us through that.
I mean, it's hard to say. Nobody knew who I was, first of all, and I'm like one of 3 or 4 white people on the boat. Skinny little white dude hanging out in the piano lounge, and I think, you know, it took a minute for people to catch on to, you know, what I was doing, or really, like, you know, feel like it was okay to I don't know, to pay me any attention or something. I don't know.
Because as far as I understand it, you did the open mic, and then everyone was like, whoa. And then from then on, the piano lounge was packed every night, and everyone was coming to see you and stuff.
Yeah. I went to that open mic, and I did Earth, Wind & Fire, Can't Hide Love with the house band, and which is just a killing tune, you know. Yeah, and everybody went nuts, and yeah, from then on, people were coming to the piano lounge every night, so that was a good move.
And then I understand the Stevie Wonder connection continues, because you've actually played for Stevie Wonder, is that right?
Yeah.
So what happened?
I had the honor and privilege to sing and play, basically backing him up for a party on his birthday this last year. And how that came about was I had been playing weekly at this restaurant called Quartet in Portland, Oregon, where I live, of course. And the owner of the restaurant, Frank Taylor, apparently had been friends with Stevie for many years. And their history went back to a time when Frank had a restaurant back east somewhere, and Stevie had come into the restaurant. Somehow they hit it off and became good friends. And so now Frank can just call up Stevie and be like, hey man, why don't you come to Portland for your birthday? I'll throw you a big party. So Stevie said, okay, sounds great. And so since I had been playing at the restaurant already weekly, Frank and I had a good rapport at that point. And he said, why don't you put together a band to back up Stevie? And I said, oh, thank you, my benevolent master.
So how did that feel, given how important Songs in the Key of Life was to your growth in music, to then be actually playing for Stevie? How was that?
It's difficult to put into words, but I felt it was just such a right place at the right time.
Were you nervous?
Amazing. Like, I was a little bit nervous. I was starstruck, for sure. And actually, they asked me to sing him "Happy Birthday" as he walked onto the stage. If anything was going to make me nervous, that would be it. So yeah,
it must have been absolutely surreal.
It was amazing.
So then, moving on to recording, I think a lot of people first heard you through your friend Farnell Newton's album.
Correct.
How did that come about? How did that collaboration come about? How did you meet him?
Okay, so pretty much like the premier jazz club in Portland is called Jimmy Mac's, and I had been tuning the piano there for several years. And Farnell Newton was playing a show there that night. And coincidentally, I think he was doing the show with another local Portland artist, Liv Warfield, who you may know, I don't know, yeah, who now sings with Prince's band, the MPG. And she and I are good friends. So she happened to be in there while I'm tuning the piano, and Farnell comes in because they're getting ready for the show. And you know, Liv comes over, I give her a big hug, and she says, you know Farnell Newton, right? And I said, no, who's that? So she introduced us, we hit it off, and next thing I know, Farnell's calling me up, asking me to do, a collaboration for his debut album, which we ended up calling Everything Is Clear.
Mm-hmm. And then is that how that then morphed into your own album? Because obviously he's on your album as well now.
He is. I mean, I had already been working on my album at that point. Okay. So, I mean, it was a good conjunction because he needed me and I needed him at that point. And it worked out really nicely. We're kind of part of a circle of musical people in Portland who, if you're in my circle, if you want me to be on your album, if you want me to offer my piano or vocal services to you, I will do that at no cost whatsoever. And I'll probably call you at some point and you come do the same for me.
That's really nice. So it's like a family.
That's the way that we work in Portland.
Wow,
absolutely.
Amazing. So everyone's supporting everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you about is your writing. Mm-hmm. So the lyrics on your songs are very deep and thoughtful, and in many cases very spiritual. Yeah. So where does that all come from?
It's just it's a large part of who I am, growing up in a Christian household and just kind of along the way, spending a lot of time with scriptures and kind of, just trying to kind of figure out how that fits into my life and trying to relay those messages through my music has just always been just a large part of what I wanted to, a key component that I wanted to include in my music, because I feel like a lot of modern music just has left that out mm-hmm. anymore, and that's what a lot of the great old soul music, that's what it had that was so great, Does that come back to the Stevie album in the lyrics that really mean something? That's what I was just going to say. Exactly, like those the Stevie albums from the '70s. Those are my favorite albums of all time. Music of My Mind, Talking Book, Intervisions, all those albums are my favorite. Those are my favorite albums of all time. And his lyrics were always relevant. And I feel like the majority of the music that's coming out these days, particularly in the soul genre, mm-hmm. is just kind of vapid and empty. lyrically.
And clearly you've struck a chord. You've gone against the grain a little bit and done something different, and you've really struck a chord, and people are appreciating that. And obviously you're getting a lot of love from lots of different places.
Yeah.
So what does the future hold for you? Where do you want this to go for you? Where do you want this to lead?
Wherever it's supposed to go. I'm not going into this with any expectations. I'm just kind of riding the wave. So,
and you're prolifically writing more and more songs, aren't you? And you're working on a second album now.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
And when you're writing, what's the process you go through? How do you write? How do you create the songs that you write?
I've definitely approached composing from a lot of different angles, and I'm not going to say all different angles, but I haven't exhausted all of them yet, I don't think. But sometimes it's a melody that comes to me. Sometimes it's a bass line and some like a chord progression. Sometimes it's lyrics. It just depends on what comes to me first, I guess. But a lot of the time when I'm composing, I'll be composing like a bass line at the keyboard with like changes at the same time and a melody. If I'm just starting from scratch, if I just sit down at the piano and start messing around, I'm usually like singing a melody over the top of a bass line and a chord progression. And that seems to be pretty good. Like if I have a formula, which I don't generally consider myself to have like a standard formula, but that's one of the ones that I use for sure.
And you're on tour now with Music Connects and Mi-Soul.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to come back to Europe and do more gigs and stuff?
Yes.
So I think in the spring, I think you're going to be coming back and doing some more dates and stuff.
Going to be back. We actually have a solid date at the Jazz Cafe on April 11th.
Yeah.
And the tickets are on sale now. So,
great.
So yeah, if you missed Ronnie Scott's and you want to come see me and the Good People, Jazz Cafe, April 11th. So.
Brilliant. And the final thing I want to ask you is I've spent a lot of time with you over the last few days, and one thing that's incredible is your attention to detail when you're performing stuff. And you talked earlier about the fact that when you're producing this album, it's taken you 4 years to do it. Mm-hmm. And so you've spent a lot of time making sure it's right. Where does that all come from? Because in all the performances you've done, you're very, very particular about making sure that everything is right and you're doing everything to the best of your possible ability. Right. Which is, not everyone does that, and so that's a really amazing thing to see. So where does that come from? What's that about?
That sort of meticulous nature, you mean? I don't know. I'm a Virgo, first of all.
So it's a star sign.
I think that has something to do with it. Yeah. I don't know, man. I've just always been very meticulous about kind of everything in my life, but particularly when it comes to my art. This thing that I'm sharing with the world, I want it to be right before I put it out there for people to see. So, I don't want the music to be falsely represented. So, I want to make sure that it's right before it's out there.
Well, it seems to be paying dividends, and thank you so much for coming into Mi-Soul, and I wish you all the best for the future. Cheers, Jarrod.
Appreciate it.
Gotta keep hope, gotta stay strong.